Hello, everybody. It's a warm welcome to you. My name is Sunil Naphray, a Transformational Life Coach, NLP practitioner, and clinical hypnotherapist, running another stimulating podcast as part of our Mastering the Mind series. It's a great honor and privilege and pleasure to have my wonderful distinguished guest, Mr. Mustafa Sasmaz. So would you want to say a quick hello, Mustafa, to the audience?
Hi, Sunil. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
It's been great
Thank
that we continue on this.
Absolutely. And we are going to do many more podcasts covering lots of stimulating topics and themes around the mind, the brain science and psychology and philosophy. All fascinating areas. We'll try and make it as relevant to everybody. But we will be going through some jargon as well, because that's important. And what we're going to be focusing on in today's podcast is we're going to be looking at thinking, particularly rational thinking and irrational thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a bit of time now going through some content. So please feel free, if you need to make yourself a drink, cup of coffee, or get yourself a notepad to make notes, please do. Because once I've finished the presentation, which may take around 30 minutes, maybe a bit longer, then after that, I'm going to pivot the actual session across to my wonderful colleague, Mustafa, who in his own right is a great thought leader and a superb philosopher, has got lots of deep insights about the workings of everything in life, absolutely everything, internal and exterior. So we're gonna ask Mustafa for his ideas, his views, and obviously I will then offer my views as well. But hopefully it'll make for a very stimulating discussion for all of you, and hopefully a very intriguing and interesting podcast. Okay, so at this point, everybody, I'm just going to do my screen share. So just bear with me while I get my information up. Okay, so I'm just going to show a document, a Word document. Can I just check with you, Mustafa, my friend, that you can see this?
Yes, I see. Yes, top one. Good.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Right.
I see
Thank
the
you very
6
much.
boxes.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what I thought was, now you can probably tell immediately that the way that I have presented this short presentation on rational thinking and irrational thinking, I've tried to present the differences between the two in a rational way. I've tried to use some order and some logic and some structure in giving the rational thinking aspects a green color and the irrational yellow. I've purely done this, if I'm being serious now, I've purely done this just to show the audience how some of the, how distinct the differences are. I thought if I did this as a logically based diagram, then that will just get across some of the key differences. So jokes to one side, I probably am more on the rational side and Mustafa's more on the irrational, but obviously that will make for a wonderful, stimulating discussion a bit later on. But now I'm going to go through the content. So what I have done here is I've drawn a distinction between rational thinking and irrational thinking. And I've also divided it up by organizing principles. So each difference will be looked at in a particular lens. The first one is the definition, then the logical basis, then the emotional aspects, then by experience, and then by success. So for example, with rational thinking, in terms of the definition, it can be defined as a thinking process which is based on reason and logic, okay? Now, the whole thing about thinking, in terms of how we define thinking, essentially, it's about considering something. It's about reasoning with something, trying to understand it in some shape or form. You're not really even assessing it or evaluating. Those come afterwards. You're just immersed in the actual thought itself, okay? And that's what thinking is about. But there are certain ways of thinking. So I want you to start thinking as the audience, well, how do I think? Am I more in the rational thinking paradigm, or am I more irrational, or somewhere in the middle? So by definition, rational thinking is about something which is based on reason and logic. So the reason why I'm thinking like this is because I want to follow some kind of order, some kind of structure, and there must be a purpose or an aim, goal behind it, which is why I'm thinking about it. That makes it rational. With irrational thinking, It's where the individual completely disregards reason and logic in favor of emotion. So irrational thinking is largely driven by emotions. Okay. Now, no one's saying this is the wrong way to think. We're not saying that at all on the podcast. We're just having a discussion about the differences. And obviously, the audience, yourself, will make up your own mind whether there are benefits and drawbacks from each one in terms of how you're going to be thinking about thinking in future. Okay. So talking about the actual logical basis, it's very, very much with rational thinking, you're very much within the conscious mind. You're reasoning with things, all the different elements, all the different stages and steps. You're thinking about it consciously, explicitly, through rational thinking, and that's where logic comes in. However, in terms of logic, the irrational thinker does not really follow any kind of logical basis to what they're thinking about. Therefore, the thinking can be quite random and it can be very, very broad. It may be both vague and specific at the same time, but doesn't follow any kind of set structure. A rational thinker would like to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that order in a line, maybe more linear. However, with somebody who thinks irrational, it may be that rather than a line graph for a rational thinker, maybe a scatter graph for an irrational thinker. They've got all the ideas and concepts, but they're not necessarily in the order because they're more creative. And if they're feeling happy, if they're feeling adventurous, if they're feeling they want to take some risks, then that will then empower them to be able to use their subconscious mind to think creatively. So their subconscious mind is more or less utilized on a regular basis when they are engaged in irrational thinking. They're allowing their subconscious mind, which is behind the conscious mind, to do lots of thinking. And this is where it's the place of wisdom, intuition, creativity, imagination. They allow that to work for them in terms of how they think through things. But even though with a rational thinker, all their thinking is going to go into a funnel in a certain order and there's going to be an outcome. But with irrational thinking, there may not be any specific outcomes. They just may be, I'm just thinking about it, and that's how I'm going to leave it. And then, but then again, they may want to employ rational thinking to start to funnel it. But then again, purely irrational thinking is more random based. From an emotional point of view, the rational thinker will not allow some of their emotions, maybe their negative emotions, get in the way of logic. Logic comes first, order and structure, and doing things in a timely fashion, because that for them is rational, not to waste time, because time is precious, because we've got other things to do. That's how a rational thinker. So they're emotional. I'm not saying their emotional intelligence is lower, but they're not necessarily engaging in emotions to be able to come to decisions as to what they do with those thoughts. So before making a decision, they will not bring in emotions into it. They'll just think of logic. They'll think of time. They'll think of money. They'll think of impact on people, impact on themselves, the use of resources. All these things will come into mind from a logical, non-emotional point of view. Okay. Now, an irrational thinker cannot look past emotion. They live and breathe in the emotion of it. If they feel elated, if they feel angry, they feel frustrated, doesn't matter what the emotions are, that will feed the irrational thinker's imagination, because that's what they thrive on, to generate possible ideas, to then start to think of things that will help themselves, the world. So then they may have massive causes that they want to deal with, but a rational thinker will think in a more structured way. In terms of experience, a rational thinker is driven by experience and facts. So they'll be looking at facts. So almost like a scientific-based approach. Things that have been proven, things that have been proved to be correct, okay? And irrational thinking is driven, again, it's driven by emotion and not necessarily by one's experience and learning lessons. Even though the lessons may generate emotions, that's what they're really concerned about. I want to feel in that particular state. My idea of happiness is this, and it may not be rational at all. And in terms of success, rational thinking allows a person to succeed. In some respects, irrational thinking, if it's not structured in a particular way, it may unwittingly hinder success for the individual. But then you might say, well, Sunil, how are you defining success are you defining it in a very rational way, in a very logical way? And that's a very, very good point. But if we look at success as something where there has been progression and achievement and movement and shifts beforehand, then this is something that's not going to be an absolute priority. That particular trajectory is not going to be a priority for a rational thinker. They're immersed in emotion. They want to feel it. They want to be it. And then maybe afterwards, some of the ideas might come out that might become more factual. They may become more tangible. But for a rational thinker, their success lies in results. It could be results driven. It could be monetarily driven. It could be to do with having success in a relationship, going past a bad situation or a bad patch. They could be looking in terms of numbers, quantifiable things. But for a success for an irrational thinker is more of a qualitative experience. But for a rational thinker, it's more along the lines of quantitative. Now, please don't take what I'm saying per se, because I totally understand. Just purely for the presentation, I wanted to give some distinction, but I totally respect the fact that you may all want to clump thinking together, and you may want to give, in a Venn diagram, a circle for rational thinking and a circle for irrational thinking. And the merger in between, the overlap might be quite big. That's absolutely fine, okay? Because there may well be some similarities. But what I thought I'd do, everybody, is take the discussion further and show some other information, which I think will also just clarify a little bit more information about some of the differences, okay? Just to move along the discussion about irrational and rational thinking. Now, let's think in terms of thoughts, okay? Because we all sometimes can have rational thoughts and irrational thoughts. So I've got this diagram here, which shows some examples of, you know, in say one situation, how a rational thought can be different from an irrational thought. So somebody who's thinking rationally might say, this is disappointing. So they'll be making a judgment about someone's behavior or the outcome of something. Or maybe, I don't know, it could be they have cooked something and it didn't quite turn out right. So they'll be talking about something quite specific, about an experience. But then the irrational guy would say, how awful. How awful is that? Okay? And then irrationally, I can't stand it. But rational, I don't like it, but I'll deal with it. Okay? A rational thinker might say, what I did was stupid. He's not perfect either. This had to happen since it did. I'm not at fault, but not to be blamed. But then somebody on the irrational side may say, I'm stupid. He stinks. This should not be happening. I am to be blamed. And then right towards the end, if I can just move the screen here, is I am a person who sometimes fails. That's how a rational person will think. But irrational would say, I am a failure because I just feel dreadful. I feel awful. So they're going to go with their emotional side. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that somebody who's a rational thinker will always think rationally, because it all depends. If their emotions get the better, if the emotions get the better of a rational thinker, they may well start thinking these thoughts like, I'm a failure, I should have done better. And if we're not careful, even rational thinkers can also start to have limiting beliefs about themselves. And if they get past the subconscious mind into the unconscious mind, then they could become deep-seated and they could start to alter one's behavior. But then a rational thinker will try to think things through in the conscious mind first. Okay, so there are some examples there of rational thoughts and irrational thoughts. Okay, now I'm just going to go through beliefs. Okay, so beliefs are more along the lines of truths. These are truths that we have about ourselves or about other people or other phenomena. Okay, so I've just put some examples here of some common irrational beliefs. Now, even a rational thinker can have these as well. It all depends how they're feeling, what situation they're in, etc., etc. For example, I must be competent in everything or I will never succeed. Okay, so if somebody has got that as their as one of their beliefs, then they're really going to be on the lines of, well, I'm a perfectionist, and if it's not perfect, it's rubbish. Okay, and obviously we all know that that should not be the case, because then we're not valuing all the good things that actually, you know, that we've actually done. My emotions are outside of my control. Actually, if we manage our thoughts, be irrational or rational, then we then, if we swish them appropriately in our mind, we then can possibly prevent anger. We can prevent some of the negative emotions, like feeling sad, unhappy, feeling frustrated, if we manage the thoughts beforehand. Okay, so emotions can be controlled, but as long as we control the thoughts first. Okay, I can never make a mistake or be seen as a failure again. People who are more on the perfectionist paradigm, they will have this irrational belief. Okay, and also I must please others to feel good about myself. Now, if somebody has this irrational belief, then they are not believers of this particular phrase, keep your glass full, and whatever is overflowing is for everybody else. They're not believers in that. Now, I am a believer in that. I think you should always keep your glass full, look after yourself first, because the only person who will look after you is you. You can only be reliant on yourself at the end of the day, okay? However, if you allow others to drink from your glass and you need them to do that, to then feel wanted, needed, you identify with yourself through what they take from you, then again, that could also form irrational beliefs, okay? If someone criticizes me, there must be something wrong with me. Now, that is not always the case, because if they criticize you, it may be their way of giving feedback. Maybe you didn't appreciate the tone. You didn't really appreciate how they spoke to you. You're not extracting the positive of what they're trying to say. Instead, you're just registering it as something very hard-hitting, and it's affected you, it's upset you. So that can be irrational. I will never measure up to others, so I should give up trying. Now, this irrational belief leads to a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset. Growth mindset allows people to persist in the face of obstacles. It allows them to go on the path to mastery and effort making, rather than giving up because they couldn't do something initially. So that's something that's really important. And again, if we're not careful, we're missing out on lots of expansive learning opportunities by having that irrational belief. If I do things for myself, I will be considered selfish. Well, for me personally, no, because it's keeping your glass full and others are drinking over. You need to keep your glass full. You need to keep making sure you do things that replenish your heart, your soul, your spirit, your mind, your body. Okay, only you can do that. Only you are in control of your own mind, body, and spirit. Okay, so if you have to do things, and this is the power of saying no. People who don't know how to say no, then sometimes that can unwittingly develop irrational beliefs like this. Okay, so if you feel you have confidence issues, you're not assertive enough, you're not putting yourself forward, and people are taking unwittingly advantage of you, then it's because of this belief that you've got. Okay, I must never take risks to make sure I don't fail. Now, again, this is an interesting one, because everybody has their own view about risk assessment and risk aversion. Okay, if you take a few more risks, if they're calculated risks, if they're measured, then that will take you more on the growth mindset trajectory, where you make more progress and you work through difficult time situation. Okay, but if you don't take any risk, then what happens then? You'll be in the comfort zone. That's fine, but then you're not going to be making much progress. You're just going to stay where you are. Okay, so by taking calculated risk, where you do your research, you make sure there is nothing that is going to cause you harm, anybody else any harm, and you take the appropriate risks that way. If everything is going right, something will going wrong. So that's looking at the polarity there. This is how you view polarity. Some people say, I can't be too happy all the time, because then I know the sadness is coming. Okay, what I'm saying is if you are in a happy state, just relish in the happiness, but also be proactive when things go wrong. Okay, and I don't deserve success. Well, that should not be the case, because every human being deserves success, no matter how minute. We all have that. That is a basic human right. And if people have that irrational belief, then they are denying themselves a very, very fundamental, basic human right. 11, it's easier to avoid problems than to deal with them. Okay, that's fine. It keeps you in the comfort zone. It keeps you in a fixed mindset and it keeps you safe, but it doesn't make you grow. And you have to assess, why aren't I achieving what I should have achieved 10 years ago? Why aren't I earning X amount of money? Why aren't I on a different property? Why aren't my children doing this? Why aren't I doing that? Why aren't I losing weight? Why aren't I giving alcohol? Why can't I give up smoking? Well, it's because it's probably easier to engage in that situation or behavior than to deal with it, because it can be very hard. Now, people like myself who are transformational life coaches who do NLP therapies and also hypnotherapy, emotional freedom technique, a whole host of complementary alternative techniques, we know how to deal with people who have these such problems, because what's holding them back are these irrational beliefs. So I'm talking to you from a practitioner point of view, but I know my colleague will have maybe a different view on this, and it would be good to hear that in a short while. But like I said, it may be easier to avoid problems, but more productive in the long term if we know how to deal with them, maybe with some support, with some research, or asking for consultation or advice. And also, my past controls my future. So they've already got it into their heads that the programs that are currently running in their unconscious mind, just let them run, okay? Because they are determining their values, their attitudes, their behavior, and it may not be working, as time goes by, as situations change. And if anything has rocked everyone's unconscious mind, it is the lockdown, it is the coronavirus pandemic, it's COVID-19. If that hasn't rocked people's unconscious, I don't know what will. So we also have to start thinking, well, how can we now learn from the past to think about the now, to prepare for the future? But if we are still holding on to irrational belief, no matter about that, Sunil, I know we've got the present and future, but for me, the past is the most important. So many things, have come from my past. I want to hold on to them. No problem with that. You can hold on to certain things, they work for you. But if you're saying to me you have a problem with X, Y, and Z, this is where this needs to be re-explored and re-examined. And when we are thinking about rational versus irrational thinking, there's a key question that comes to mind. Because I believe that every human being actually displays both, but it's their choice as to which thinking style they want to adopt. And one thing that one has to ask themselves, if they are more aligned to rational thinking or irrational thinking, this is the key question they have to ask themselves. How useful, yes, I repeat, how useful is this thought or belief in my life right now and in the future? The thought or the belief, as in a rational thought or belief or irrational thought, how useful, how is it serving me? Okay. Now, this is about bringing you to the present, okay? Because it's the present, from my point of view as having been on this planet for 51 years, where I'd say for the first 40 years before I'm in my midlife, I thought everything was driven by the past and maybe it's all about the future and ignoring the present. But now my thinking has changed from my midlife review 5 years ago, where I very, very much am very conscious of my rational beliefs and thoughts, and I'm always dealing with them every day, every single day, in terms of making a choice, a decision that will help me, my future, and also help my children and people I love and care about, and the clients that I serve up and down the country and around the world. So this question is absolutely critical. How useful is this thought? And it's perfectly fine if you say, Sunil, being irrational helps me to be creative. It helps me if I have to engage in my emotional health or emotional side of myself or emotional intelligence. Let me sit with it, because that's where I get my inspiration and best ideas. That's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. Okay. But if you feel that for me to get through a crisis, a problem, I've got to think in steps. First I do A, then B, and then C, then I work my way down, okay? That's absolutely fine, but you need to ask yourself the question, how useful is it? Now, I'm just going to talk very briefly now about the benefits of the thinking irrationally, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the mental health benefits of rational thinking. So I want to try and present both. And I want to try and present this from my modality, which is around promoting good mental health and positive emotional well-being, because that is the domain I'm coming from. Okay, but my colleague here, Mustafa, when I pivot everything down to him, he will respond from his modalities. Okay, so in terms of irrational thinking, the benefit of rationality is that once we're all rational, we're all doing the same thing. It all becomes predictable. Basically, life becomes very monotonous and quite boring because everyone's doing something in a certain way. Now, maybe there are particular countries that may have more of a kind of an alignment to regime-based approaches. Maybe they are more autocratic in nature. So they may be thinking along more rational lines, and hence you tend to get similar things happening in terms of clothing, values, work, and things of that nature. Okay. So again, that's something, again, for those countries, it works for them. It keeps them in order. It keeps things in balance. There is an equanimity around it as well. So that could be one particular benefit there, in the sense that if it works for them, but it may not work for some of the more Western democracies, such as the UK or Australia or Canada or America, where we need creativity, we need imagination, we need to think outside the box, okay? Because sometimes going outside the box is where the solutions are, okay? And I know from my educational background, the works of Dylan Williams on Outside the Black Box, raising classroom attainment, he said, well, we can rely on the box, the school, giving everything, but are you sure it's going to give the whole education? Should we not be bringing the outside more inside? And there's more people talking about the benefits of outdoor learning, bringing more of the world into the classroom, the environment, but this is going to require more ingenuity, more creativity, and not necessarily a logical curriculum. So again, there's some benefits there. Also, as soon as we have faith that a certain outcome will be in our favor, odds stacked against it suddenly change. Because again, if we put all our eggs in one basket, there's a risk that it may not work out, that all your best laid plans are not going to work. I mean, I just have to ask the question, how many plans did all of us make rationally before the lockdown hit, before the coronavirus arrived here in the UK? Everybody was probably thinking, I'm going to do my work here, I'm going to do this course, I'm going to finish my exams, I'm going to do this holiday, that project, do this overseas. But now what's happened now is we're all forced to think creatively about what we need to do. So maybe some respects, the pandemic has allowed us to be comfortable with irrationality, because we've got time to do it and get the benefits from it as well. Now, there's been lots of successful people like Muhammad Ali, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson. They haven't gone down a logical route, a rational route. They've thought well outside the box. They've looked at the competition and done the opposite. And a lot of business people say, well, that's been the key to their success, to go away from what everyone else is doing. And also imagination, is very powerful, because that can create things. And it can really, really help. I mean, the application of science is rational, but the creation of the science could be irrational. It could be a scientist trying different things out, being creative in looking at things. I mean, I'm sure in terms of the treatment of coronavirus, I'm sure the scientists are looking at every possible opportunity and thinking creatively and seeing where the actual logic can arise from the rationality to get something that can be tried and tested. So it's fascinating. And just to finish off, in terms of the mental health benefits of rational thinking, okay? This is from my perspective as a practitioner, because rational thinking is quite simply balanced thinking. And if somebody is being overly irrational, that's causing them lots of anxiety and stress and possibly depression, okay? Then it's all about, please make sure you're thinking about everything in a balanced way. So we're not saying don't be irrational, but don't do it at the expense of bringing your mental health down. That's why you may have to bring your creative ideas into some kind of perspective, so then you can achieve that balance. Also, rational thinking allows for very likely possibility that our lives include good or bad, love and hate, and success and failure. So it's about accepting polarities, okay? that for every good there is a bad, and that's what rational thinkers do. Now, irrational thinkers, the pure irrational thinkers, will not necessarily think in terms of polarity. They just want to get everything out there because it's about their expression from their emotional states. Okay, and they may not look at the implications because that is that is the domain of the rational thinker. Also, thinking rationally avoids extreme thinking and therefore avoids submitting to extreme feelings. Now, one of the dangers of being overly in the emotional paradigm is not being able to manage the impact. Because if you're too much, if you find that your creative flair comes from thinking about angry situations, you've got to make sure it doesn't get the better of you and you can't come out of the anger state yourself. And then you're having, and it reflects in your attitude and behavior with yourself and other people. So it's about keeping your thinking in balance. Be irrational, but be measured about it. Rational thinking is also realistic thinking, which is grounded in some objective relationship to the real. Always try, this is what I'm saying, with rational thinking is if somebody is displaying mental health issues, it's about, and they're troubled by the past, which is where the shadows come from, and they're haunting them. Or they are worried about the future. There's fear, because fear is about anticipating something in the future where they fight, fly, or possibly freeze. And rational thinking will help to bring them into the present in terms of they may, you know, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I've got some money coming in, I've got some food on the table, my kids are fine, we're healthy, we haven't got coronavirus. It's about looking at those things. And that's where rational thinking can help somebody to kind of be a little bit more grounded. And also, finally, rational thinking is also pragmatic thinking, okay? More fully unbalanced rational thinking may not always be productive, and it may be overly idealistic in the negative sense. So it may not really amount to anything. And it may just be like lots of ideas and thoughts, but they're not being funneled in any direction to get something which is going to be of benefit to anyone or even themselves, okay? So it's about thinking in a progressive and a pragmatic way. So there has to be some overarching reason for doing it, for doing something. Okay, now, essentially, I've really coming towards the end, and I'm going to very shortly pivot to my very good colleague, Mustafa. So what I've attempted to do, everybody, is draw some distinctions between rational thinking and irrational thinking. I've looked at how they differ, how thoughts and beliefs differ from each other as well. We've looked at some common beliefs around irrationality, and I've tried to contextualize them and give some examples, and also some of the benefits of irrational thinking and the mental health benefits of rational thinking. So I hope I haven't given an overly biased view, because I think possibly I am a little, mind you, Mustafa knows me very well. He might say, you're a typical rational thinker, Mr. Sunil Naphray, and I'm going to put you straight on quite a few things. No problem at all. This is why we're doing this podcast. So, Mustafa, I'm now going to give my voice a rest, but my mind is going to awaken even more as I tell you, my friend, to respond to that. And I'm quite happy to go back to any of the content if you want me to do that. It's your choice, my friend. I'll go back to the beginning. I'll hand the floor to yourself.
Sunil, this was really good and enlightening. Very good. Thank you. I have tried my best to listen to every word you said, which is really is a very good summary of rationality and irrationality. The comments I will make will be sort of complementing to what you try to project. But I want to start at the the point that you made about science. Given the fact that we are humanity is in change mode all the time. The very real thing is the change itself, that the world evolves and moves forward or sideward. But changes happens again on an irrational basis. There are three steps in very short summary. There are three steps in the way paradigm shifts in science. It's called the crisis point. But to come to crisis point, that the realization of an instrument, for example, which is not good enough to help people, therefore it needs to be made better, one model up, etc. So first, it is defined that this is no good, but in definition, in defining something no good, is again, it is as well as rational, it is an irrational thought behind this. So anything rational is in fact is attempting to rationalize the irrational. That's how you make steps in science. So, and the whole process is called, from philosophical perspective, paradigm shift. Shift happens in paradigm in thinking. Therefore, need is created. Therefore, this needs to be fed, whether by making a new instrument or upgrading already an existing one.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the way science works in a nutshell. Now I start from the beginning. I would like to add only complementing views to what you said. Now, as humans, we are happiness-seeking creatures.
Yes.
But the condition, the notion of happiness is a problem one, because the minute you feel happy, the whatever you achieve, the minute you feel happy, you then start moving towards unhappiness, because you got the familiarity with what you've achieved, what you got at hand, bought or sold, bought or achieved. Then this familiarity, it's no longer novel, it's familiar now. And your irrational thinking say, hey, come on, let's go, adventure. And then your irrational thinking say, hey, what are you doing? You need energy for this. So energy level is the driving force behind the irrational thinking. But regardless of that, rational thinking will prod you, then your irrational thinking prods you, and the rational says, where is the energy from? Conserve your energy or pocket money or whatever. But then collaboration starts between them, or fighting starts. Now, one step back I'll take. Irrational and rational thinking centers are not in one South Pole, one in North Pole. It is in us, in our body, in our head. So it's always together. They are either fighting or collaborating, but rarely collaborating, always fighting. I just would like to say one thing now. Definition. Humans are defined as thinking animals. So what is animal? Animals are irrational creatures. So humans are irrational creatures too, but they have a thinking ability. Thinking ability just thinking ability is the rational thinking ability I'm talking about. So it is the two work together, but mainly the rational, rationalize the irrational thought, and then we make decisions and make not progress, plans, things ahead to come out with a good progress with it. We need to really understand the role of imagination, our experience in life, how in different circumstances and in different contexts we perform, we think, we rationalize the irrational thought. We need to understand all that, and then as a result, we will have a better understanding of our own self. The inner peace is again the work of rational and irrational, and it's the way it manifests in us. Understand the dynamics of it. if we sort of understand the contentment within irrationality and with the work of rational, we then turn ourselves, still very vibrant people, personalities, without denting the operations of irrational.
Mm.
I am in person. I love the irrational side of humans. It is after all what makes us very unique
You-
and what makes us very thriving.
yeah.
If you don't have your irrational thinking operating much, then gradually you become an insular and just become a bystander. But life is
Mhm.
given us once, and we need to make the best use of it.
Yeah.
Still more to talk, but I don't think I should go any further.
No,
Uh,
that's fine. I know we're running a little bit. Well, the time is against us, so I know we can talk a lot longer. But yes, we are coming to the end of the segment now. But I just wanted to ask you, Mustafa. So you're saying then, for us to achieve inner peace, happiness, success, bliss, which is what we all want from this life, particularly more so than ever with what's happened with the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown. Are you saying that we need to reconcile our irrational side and our rational side to try to reach some kind of an understanding? And also, if we are more geared towards rational thinking, should we take some from irrationality and vice versa? For an irrational thinker to be a bit more rational, but a totally rational person, try to incorporate and embed a little bit of rationality, keep it unique, keep it interesting, and keep your options open. Is that what you're saying?
uh, uh, yes, but I need to explain. I need to give examples. Now,
Okay.
we cannot just sort of explain rational and irrational of thought, how it manifests in our everyday life within within a year or 5 years span. We
Mm.
need to look at history and come back, pull things from the history and see how they manifest in our lives in the last, say, 4, 5, 6 decades, uh, and then make examples.
Yeah.
Now, inevitably into this, religion also comes, religious thought, and we contextualize this in history. Uh, until 15th century Renaissance times, humanity's life were ruled by religion, religious ideas. If you step out, then you will be punished.
Mm.
Then what happened? Suddenly something erupted. Uh, Scientific revolution started, industrial revolution started, and then machines were made. But how machines were made is all result of rationalization of irrational thought. Were there no need for machines before? Of course there were, but it is just through learning, humans understood that they can make simple gadgets and tools more elaborate and then more powerful. And one other thing is the power-seeking elements are in us. We want to be powerful in life.
Yeah.
This is another condition. Uh, Now, we live in this relatively small space, the Earth. In comparison to when you look at universe, how small we are in this planet. But the planet's resources also diminishing day by day.
Mm.
Uh, so lots of efforts are made elsewhere to sustain things.
Yeah.
um, the epidemic I will come to is giving us a short pause. What the hell we have been doing
Mm.
all these times, and eating up everything come our way. Now it is sort of the uh, thinking to ourselves. well, we cannot go out, we cannot interact with other humans, so it's self-isolation. So where is this going to take us to?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
then you obviously, if you understand the way your irrational thinking operates, then your rational side comes and says to irrational, "Hey, hold on a minute. Now we don't need to fight. We need to make a good agreement together, so that we give this person peace of mind, rather than tearing him apart. You know, do this, do that, and buy new stuff." Let me give you one example.
Yeah.
The iPhone, for example. When the mobile phones came about, there was no iPhone, no Samsung, and all these clever phones, whatever label you give them. It was simple, functioning, digital, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 9. Uh, you can make your own phone calls.
Mm.
I don't know if the first phone had a function you can send message, but I don't know. Now we have fully functional little computers in our hand, but then these little computers change model every year. While what drives this uh, model change is scientific irrational thought,
Mm.
and the need created for it is also irrational,
Yeah.
because you can use the same phone as long as it is not broken or damaged for 10 years. It can
Yeah.
be made like this.
Yeah.
But the industry is not making it like that. It will only last 12 months, because a new one will come with some new features and new
Yes.
functions.
Yeah.
So we need to understand pandemic in the context of that. And because if we sort of try to grab everything that industry provides us, it is a mayhem. It's endless infighting. You become slave to your whatever the marketplace offers you, and you try to get everything.
Yeah.
In this context, yes, rational takes his stick in his hand and kicks, not kicks, but prods the irrational. Hold on a minute. Look what's happening, and give this man a peace of mind and inner peace. And this inner peace comes with energy levels sort of maintained, and obviously health is important, but health is not in our conversation here. So this is in a nutshell the role of rational and irrational in our everyday life. The
Yeah.
industry runs, and the person also needs to understand this from both perspectives of rational and irrational.
Yeah, yeah, that's great, Mustafa. I mean, just a final point I want to make is just from my everyday conversations and interactions with people on social media, or just in my own kind of social circles and professional circles, that everybody, it's, irrationality is high on the agenda. People are thinking all sorts. They're thinking of things that they never thought about before, ever. But what they're trying to do is they're try to be in it and try to get some sense out of it. So they're trying to use their rational brain to try to work with some of the positives, and then to calm down the negatives, and trying to look at ways through this. But it's kind of irrational thinking has really, really just exploded, I think, on the whole planet. And I have to say, when we had the lockdown, when it was announced 7, 8 weeks ago in the UK, I was thinking, oh my God, are we in some kind of a war? It's just like the whole country's being prepared for war or something, and we all need to be on our guard, and we can't do certain things anymore. And my mind was going it was thinking of all sorts of things that were completely not in line with how I think about things rationally. Do I have a future? Will I have money coming in? Will I be able to see my family again? And all sorts of things that started. But then again, you sort of calm it down. When the emotions calm down, you start see things a bit more clearly. But then it's almost like my rational thinking has been sharpened because of the irrational things that I've thought about. as a result of this, very unexpected international universal event. Okay, then, Mustafa, we're going to have to close out the segment now. I want to thank you wholeheartedly for giving your time, devotion, and dedication to this podcast. You've come up with some fantastic things, and thank you for your very, very generous comments about my delivery and my presentation. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you so much. Please do leave your comments in the description box, and whichever platform you find this video, please do. If you've got any thoughts, any questions you've got, please can you send them, so then we can then look at them and then address them for you. And let's get a discussion going about rational thinking and irrational thinking, and the potential of each one, if we're able to harness them both for our, for all of our better futures. Okay, everybody. So thank you, Mustafa. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.